Thank you, George, and good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here and see who's joining us this morning. Stephen and I are going to spend the next 45 minutes talking to you really about the journey that we've been on in terms of our work in the last few years and our understanding of creativity in a learning context, why it's important, and the ways in which we are helping hopefully develop a common understanding and a shared language around creativity. So everything we're going to show you this morning, the resources and information can be found on the National Improvement Hub, which you can find just by searching for the Education Scotland website, and also on the Creativity Portal, which you may be familiar with. It's our website, which is a one-stop shop for anything to do with creativity. It's full of really useful resources, contacts, and information, research about creativity.
So hello, I'm Stephen, and so I'm just going to talk you through 3 or 4 slides here. When we talk about creativity and creativity skills, especially within education, one of the things that we found from our research was that there are, you could sit in a room with people, 100 people, and talk about creativity, and everyone would be nodding and understanding what you were talking about. But when we actually read through the research, it turns out they could all have very different actual ideas of what creativity means, and quite personal ideas, which can be fine in many contexts, but we found that there were a lot of preconceptions and misunderstandings, and actually we were all talking about slightly different things. The research tells us that men and women have different definitions of what creativity is, just by splitting down that divide, and then different subjects have different definitions of what creativity means to them. If you imagine the technologies looking at creativity as design, problem solving, and perhaps the expressive arts having a definition of creativity to do with self-expression, as being quite different, almost polarized ideas of what creativity means. So we realized we had a linguistic barrier that we had to kind of tackle and deal with, and a number of preconceived notions about what creativity is and how to use it. Some people see creativity as almost an elitist thing. It's geniuses are creative, and it's not for the likes of us. This slide, my wife tells me, is the campest slide she's ever seen. I quite like it. The idea that it's this kind of evolutionary trajectory that there are normal people, and then there are the creative types at the top end and the top echelons of society. And of course, that's simply not true, because we are all creative. There's also this idea, the mythology of the genius and the genius moment, and whilst there are moments of insight, and that's documented by psychologists, it doesn't just happen. The eureka moment came after months and months, if not years, of dealing with a problem and trying to think through it, and only when you went away and had a bath did that all piece together. So whilst there are moments of insight, it's based on hard work, and E equals MC squared didn't just come out of nowhere. It's actually a massive amount of work that suddenly came together in the end. So there is no kind of genius moment. There's also the idea that the arts are inherently creative, and in fact a lot of people, and it's hard to kind of fight our own preconceived notions that when we talk about creativity we are talking about the arts, and that's it's simply just not the case. I always challenge people to say, is this art, this particular picture, which it clearly is, but was it creative, given that it was built in a warehouse by an army of students who were given a set of paints and a print, and their choices were simply which colours to use on that particular version, and then it was signed off by the artist at the end of the process. So was the original one creative? Was this particular one creative? There's a lot of questions around that, and how creative the arts can be, and is it possible to deliver arts without ever being creative? It'd be a challenging question I'd throw out there. So we had a lot to work with and a lot of things to look at when we were talking about creativity skills. Our journey very much started, I suppose, with Sir Ken Robinson, who challenged and asked the question, do schools kill creativity? And if you haven't seen the TED Talk, and specifically the RSA's animation version of it, then go on YouTube and watch it after this.
Mm-hmm. So, our journey started, I suppose, 2011, 2012, when we knew we wanted, it was the challenge really, how do we encourage educators to be able to talk more about creativity, to recognise what is creativity in learning, what does it look like, how do we define creativity when it's something that we all instinctively know works really well and engages learners, but it's really difficult to talk about and to evidence. And if you look on the creativity portal, for example, you'll find loads of different definitions from different people of creativity. But we set out to look at what was happening in schools in Scotland to see if we could recognise what was happening in terms of creative learning and creative teaching, and to produce a report on that, which we could share nationally. And there were two big pieces of work that went together. This was the first of them, which was done with seven national learning partners who you can see along the bottom of the slide, everybody's logo, including College Development Network and Creative Scotland. We worked together to produce this National Creative Learning Plan, which is an amazing document. You can download it from the Creativity Portal and Creative Scotland website, and I would really encourage you to read the vision, which is at the beginning of it. It's incredibly ambitious, and it does talk about why creativity is so important, not only in learning, but in life and in work. And of course, it's really important for our nation, our health and well-being, our culture and our creativity and our economy. So I would draw your attention to that plan. And importantly, it was endorsed by 3 different government ministers. And that was a first as far as we're aware. The cultural minister, the education and lifelong learning ministers all endorsed that plan, and we are still working to it, but we're on a several years in now, so there's a new implementation plan. The next slide shows you the piece of work that Education Scotland did, which was a review of what was happening in schools in 2012. What did creativity look like? Were teachers talking about creativity? Were creativity skills evident in learners? And through that piece of work, we came to our own definition of what creativity is in a learning context, which we'll show you in a couple of slides. Importantly, as a result of this piece of work for Education Scotland, creativity became recognised within our organisation as a really important value, and this slide shows the 4 core values of Education Scotland as an organisation. We think it's really significant that creativity is there. It could have been innovation, but it isn't. It's creativity as being something that the organisation holds as a really important value for ourselves and the way we go about our work. This slide shows you the definition of creativity, which we arrived at as a result of the work we did on the curriculum impact report. A lot of really interesting debates between ourselves and the team we were working with. And we also had some input from an American educationalist called Eric Booth. You may have come across him, who really gave us a challenge that we took on. He talked about the linguistic barrier around the word creativity, which is about when people hear that word, they often switch off because they think they're not creative themselves, and therefore what you're going to say isn't meaningful to them. Or they think you're talking about the arts, and therefore they think that's not to do with me. So he challenged us to come up with maybe 3 or 4 core attributes of creativity which would help us to quickly explain to people what we meant. And the next slide shows you many of the attributes of creativity which you'll all recognise, and you'll all be able to identify, I'm sure, with a number of those attributes on the screen. But if you're trying to use those to explain to people what creativity is, it's going to be quite long-winded. And so that's why Eric Booth challenged us to come up with these simple, most important attributes of creativity, which we're now going to show you in the next slides. And we termed them the creativity skills, and that's what we have continued to refer to them as. Stephen recently did a presentation at the college's Essential Skills Steering Group, and it was a result of that conversation that we're here today sharing this presentation with you, because I think it was of great interest and felt that your work on essential skills was very connected to this. So that's why we wanted to share with you today. The 4 core attributes of creativity that we arrived at were curiosity, open-mindedness, imagination, and problem solving. And if a learner exhibits those qualities, you will find that they are motivated and ambitious for change for the better, confident in their own viewpoint, and able to lead and work well with others, and importantly, they're able to apply their creativity to other settings. And I'm sure that you recognise those attributes in your learners. I mentioned this earlier on, but one of the really important reasons why we've done this work is because creativity wasn't really being talked about. We think it's really important to have defined creativity in a learning context and to have come up with these core skills, because then people are able to talk about what creativity is, able to recognise it in learners, and not only practitioners but learners are able to recognise value and talk about their own skills. There we have it. We're wanting to help people, support people develop meaningful conversations about creativity skills. And so the piece of work that Stephen and I have been involved in following our impact report is to communicate some of the key messages from that report. And we've done that using simple infographics. And these are the first 2 that we produced, which you may have seen as banners. The one on the left, it shows the different ways in which you can find support if you want to find out more or get involved or make contacts with people who can support you in your work. And the one on the right is simply presenting the creativity skills. And we have found that it instantly makes sense to people. And it gets over the barrier of people perhaps thinking you're talking about the expressive arts. You know, science practitioners, social sciences practitioners can look at that and see how it relates to their work. Following on from those first infographics, which went down so well, we commissioned design company to work with us to develop these infographics, which go into more depth. And the idea is it's helping people to see how creativity relates to the curriculum for excellence, how it relates to the focus on attainment at the moment, which is the banner on the left. The middle one is how creativity relates to employability and the drive for supporting young people in positive destinations into work, and what creativity skills are and why they're important. And we hope that people are using these as a stimulus for learning, a stimulus importantly for conversation and dialogue around creativity. The one in the middle is specifically targeted at early years settings, and the one top left is for learners as they go through the system. The one on the bottom right is called Exploding the Myths, I think, of creativity, to help highlight that there are certain preconceptions about creativity, which Stephen started off earlier on talking about a wee bit. This is just a close-up of one of those, which also shows you how we think about not only creativity in learning, but creativity in the whole education system, creative change for improvement, what you can do to your environment to support creative learning, what is creative teaching and how is that different from creative learning. So that's all there to encourage people to think about what the differences are.
So all of these are available on the National Improvement Hub for download, and they're all freely available there. If you search for creativity infographics, you'll find all of them. We've also had them printed as posters, some of the smaller ones, and they've been sent out to every school in Scotland. We've got them in one of them in Gaelic as well. That's gone out to every Gaelic establishment. So they're getting out into the system at the moment. We've also had them created, the big ones created as pull-up banners, and they're about to go out to the creative learning networks in each local authority. So these will be available for you to borrow and loan and get access to in your local area if you're having events or professional learning days or whatever. So they'll be available for you to use. What we're trying to do is then empower educators to develop the conversation for themselves and to apply the creativity skills and develop them practically. One of the things that's been a really big success is on the creativity portal. There's a series of, and on the Improvement Hub you can access them, there's a series of 21 short 2-minute video clips that offer you a creative exercise, completely arbitrary and random in some cases, but they challenge you to think creatively about a problem. We're gonna maybe give you a wee challenge just for 1 minute, literally 60 seconds. So if you'd like to get your typing fingers ready at your chat box, the challenge is going to be one of the ones off the Toy Box films, which is this: what if everybody in the world had 7 fingers instead of 5 on each hand? How would the world be different? What would have to change? What would be different? Go. And you've not got 5 minutes, you've got 60 seconds, which is going, yep.
Gloves.
And then what would be different about them? Would we all wear mittens instead? Would that be easier? Yeah, musical instruments is good, like that. We would all be buying shares in gloves. Yeah, I like that.
I will.
Mm-hmm. 7-fingered gloves, would they fall apart?
Let's go for designing gloves.
Ooh, climbers.
Ooh, yeah. Longer pianos. Oh yeah, I like that one. More hula hoops.
I don't think I've ever tried more than one hula hoop. Right,
hula
okay.
That's what you do
eating,
them.
I see.
You put them on your fingers.
I think you meant actual hula hoops.
The ones you eat.
Yeah, jewellery.
More rings.
Can we ever have enough jewellery? Excellent. High 7.
More arthritic joints. That's brilliant.
True. Anything you hold with your hands would have to be bigger.
Yeah. Counting would change. Oh yeah, nice one.
Okay, so you can see how quickly you can have a really interesting, humorous conversation based on a completely random what-if question, and what-ifs are great for any kind of creative challenge. One of the things that we learned from Eric Booth when he did a talk at the Scottish Learning Festival, he challenged everyone with the question of what are the similarities between a mouse and a fridge, and everybody gets stuck after 3. You know, they're both white, you put cheese in them, they've got tails. Mm-hmm. And we realised how strong persistence is a factor in creative thinking and creativity skills, because everybody got stuck and then had to really fight to get the next few and then took off again. So persistence and resilience are really strong in there. So these are really quite interesting, useful fillers, warm-ups, warm-down exercises, or indeed the start of a whole project, but designed to empower everybody into using creativity skills. So one of the things we did after all the infographics was we developed and commissioned our own meme maker. So again, through the National Improvement Hub or the portal, you'll find this. It's called Everything is Creative, and you can build your own memes and infographics within a few seconds or minutes. Interestingly, there's 2 templates. One of them is for improvement, and it's called the Inwards Outwards Forwards poster, which looks like this, but we won't go into that just now. But just if you're looking at change, improvement and planning, that can be an interesting creative tool. But the Everything is Creative poster maker challenges you to think about the 4 skills: open-mindedness, imagination, curiosity, problem solving, and apply them to your own context. So in your lessons, how are we using our open-mindedness, or how are we developing that? Or you could look at it personally: how am I open-minded, curious, imaginative, or problem solving? So it challenges you to relate the 4 creativity skills to your own context, whether it be a class, a group, a project, your own life, the whole college, a report, anything, and you can think it through with that really quickly and visualize it. You can also then use the meme maker to make your own memes on absolutely anything you like, using the infographics iconography that are already in there. So we can build quickly take a quote from anything we like and share it by social media. That's to do with creative industries, and you can simplify it and come up with really simple memes as well. So that's a tool that anyone can use, including yourselves or your learners, to relate creativity skills to their own context and then begin sharing and talking about it. Here's one that the Storytelling Forum shared on Twitter that they designed about how storytelling is creative and relates to the 4 skills, which is a really interesting challenge.
Stephen mentioned that the infographic banners are going out to creative learning networks, and you may well have come across the creative learning networks before. Basically, we have a fund which supports local authority areas to build capacity for creativity across learning in their authority, and we have the fund is set up to make links across the sectors, CLD, schools, colleges and higher education, families as well. The networks are as wide as they can be in that sense. So a lot of the local, although they're led by local authority contacts, we've encouraged them to make links with their local higher and further education establishments. You would be able to find out who your local authority creative learning network contact is on the creativity portal. You just search for the local authority area that would be relevant, and there'll be a contact link there. But the creative learning networks are different in every local authority, depending on local needs and local priorities. They do really interesting work, and a lot of it is about supporting practitioners to develop their own professional capacity, and they do a lot of work in terms of events, CPD, and developing resources, so worth connecting up with. So why is creativity important? There's some documentation which connects to Curriculum for Excellence, which absolutely has creativity skills at the core, and the first one of these is the Building Curriculum 4 document, which is all about skills for learning, life and work. And you'll know that the curriculum is very much a skills-based curriculum, and we know that that is very much something you're all talking about in terms of essential skills needed for life and work. Another key document in this series is Building the Curriculum 3, which has this diagram we use quite a lot, and it's all about the entirety of the curriculum and what the enormity of what it tries to do in terms of young people's experience. But at the bottom of this slide are the principles of curriculum design, and we see that as being it's almost the definition of creative learning, that it needs to include challenge and enjoyment, breadth and depth, personalisation and choice, coherence and relevance, and all of those things are an important part of creative learning experience. This is a significant document which you may be familiar with. There may be a college version. There's certainly an early years version and a culture version. It's the self-evaluation framework, How Good Is Our School, which was launched in the last year or so. Significant in that for the first time it has a quality indicator specifically about creativity. Prior to this fourth edition of How Good Is Our School, creativity wasn't particularly mentioned, and that meant that schools didn't have to show inspectors what they were doing in terms of creativity and learning, and therefore there were other pressing priorities, which meant that creativity often got forgotten. But now it's in there as being something that schools are being encouraged to look at and think about, and that applies outside of schools as well. And as this slide shows, there's a definition of what creativity skills are and an illustration of what that looks like in good learning.
We also know that creativity skills are becoming far, far more important in the workplace and in terms of the Scottish economy. We'll obviously keep hearing about how uncertain the future is, how flexible and adaptable and creative we're going to have to be in order to thrive in the future world that we're moving into. Specifically, digital skills, we know that they're in need of improvement across the whole of the UK, and actually in Scotland they're further behind the British average as well. So Scotland does have a big piece of work to do in terms of digital literacy. And interestingly, the biggest hole in those skills was the ability to create and adapt content online, with 43% of the people in the biggest piece of research done saying that they were unable to do that. So that's the skill that's most in need of improvement, at which point digital skills and creativity skills align very, very closely in terms of what we need to be doing to move forwards. We also know that aspiration is very important at the minute. This is a beautiful piece of information that was in the tests. When young people were asked to consider which of these 369 careers they might be interested in or might be possible to go into, you can see that Scotland is way behind the UK average in terms of what Scottish learners believe is an option for them when they leave education. There's a lack of curiosity, a lack of open-mindedness, and a lack of imagination in that, before we even get onto how they problem solve what they're actually going to do when they leave education. So creativity skills are absolutely core to changing the mindsets of learners as they head out towards positive destinations. There are lots of quotes from industry explaining and detailing how creativity skills are going to become more important and how they're hugely valued as we move forwards as well. Certainly, if you ask leaders in industry what their top priorities are from people coming into the workplace, they may not identify creativity as being the top, but when you break it down into its component parts, it's absolutely top of the list. And part of the language that we've talked about, the definitions, are helping to identify that that's actually what employers are looking for. And obviously the creative industries, which is not the only creative industry out there. You know, the engineering industry in Scotland possibly needs to be even more creative than the creative industries. So it's not about the creative industries, but the creative industries are obviously a growth industry, and especially in Scotland. When we look at what employers are looking for, you can see from this graph, which came out recently, qualifications are in the middle of that graph, whereas attitudes and aptitudes are right at the top as being the most important things that employers are looking for. So absolutely the essential skills and creativity skills feed into that need very strongly. We've had discussions in the past about how it's not all about employability, it's not all about the economy though as well, and so this we found a lot of parallels with the higher order thinking skills on the left, which is Bloom's taxonomy, but also Maslow's on the right there, to do with the hierarchy of human needs, and creativity is at the top of both of those pyramids there. So creativity skills are not just there for our employability and our ability to learn, but also about our ability to live fulfilled lives. And the latest RSA video on YouTube is all about almost the human right to live a creative life. Within our own infographics, we very much make that point, and here's the two hierarchies next to each other. So there's skills for life on the right. And this is a beautiful quote that I like to share, which essentially makes the point that in order to be in a long-term relationship, you're going to need your creativity skills. So when it comes to us living fulfilled lives, creativity skills are absolutely valuable outside the workplace as well.
And we want to invite you to do another little bit of interacting just now. We developed a very simple spidergram to help people just do a wee exercise thinking about their own creativity skills, and this is designed to be adapted and applied to different contexts, but we thought we'd just share it with you now as it is. You can, if you've got a pencil and paper, you could maybe just draw it up for yourself, or you could just do a mind version. And perhaps take yourself in your work context as being what you're thinking about in your work. How curious are you? How open-minded are you? How imaginative are you? How much do you problem solve? How much do you apply your creativity? And score with a 5 being high and a 1 being low. And we definitely like to think of creativity skills being things that can be worked on. And Stephen and I often have conversations about, you know, the ones that we're better at than the others and the ones we need to work on. So over to you for a couple of minutes, and feel free to type in comments and questions.
I found this a really interesting exercise for me personally, because I'm from a drama background. I've always been quite a kind of airy-fairy, arty-farty type, to use the colloquialisms, and what I found was that my problem solving is the bit that lets me down. So I can be very, very strong on imagination and curiosity and open-mindedness, but actually my ability to apply those things can be quite poor at times. So that's something that I've been working on and looking at and thinking about. But it's interesting to see whether people have quite a kind of rounded diagram, or whether they have a big hole in it, or whether they lean to one side of the pentagram. So,
and it's also a good way of thinking about teamwork, because I think the two of us have different creativity skills that are quite complementary, so we work well as a team. So that's always a good way of thinking about it as well.
Yeah, because there's no saying you absolutely have to have all of these in, scoring a 5 all of the time. Very dependent on your environment. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously very true. There's also, you could actually ask this question: how much are you allowed to be curious, open-minded and imaginative within the context of your work? So they are very variable. We have used this can be used as a way of evaluating as well, but obviously within the context of obviously different moods on different days, you'll feel imaginative or not imaginative depending on how your mood is that day. But if you've got any number of learners, if you've got a large enough number to start to kind of draw some kind of conclusions from, then it is possible to gauge whether an activity, a project, did see some kind of shift in the thinking and the confidence in learners of these 5 skills, these 5 attributes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some comments there about, it does depend on the environment. We've got a slide we're going to show you in a little few minutes about the environment and the impact that can have on your creativity, and absolutely your state of mind. It is it's a very subjective thing, this. So I think it's something that as an individual you might come back to and find that in a different activity you feel quite differently about the creativity skills and which ones you've used. But yeah, a useful kind of check-in point. The next slide shows you how one of our colleagues adapted this for a primary school maths project, and the children were invited to comment on the creativity skills in the context of the work they'd been doing, using different approach to maths. So that she used it as a benchmark at the beginning and the end of that project, which is another way that you can use it.
So the discussion we're moving on to on a national level, I suppose, is can you teach creativity? Can you develop it? We were asked recently, should there be benchmarks for creativity skills, and we decided not to. So we're in the thick of that kind of discussion, and I suppose some of the things we do know from the research are that infants are born with creativity skills. Curiosity, open-mindedness, imagination and problem solving are how they learn to use their limbs, to walk, to speak. We know that those skills are there in spades. If you look in an early learning environment, that's arguably, is that are the learners more creative in nursery than they are in secondary school? Going back to Sir Ken Robinson's "Do Schools Kill Creativity" question. So we know that we don't need to, benchmark them in terms of, by this age you should be this creative, but we do need to safeguard and develop and leave space for that, for those things to happen. Kind of like learning, training a muscle, developing muscles and things like that. So we're in the mix of discussing all of that at the minute. One thing we do know, however, is that simply by talking about the creativity skills and being able to flag them up and discuss them and identify them, people are more creative just by understanding what creativity means and what they can do with it and how they can apply it in their own context. So the first thing that we can all do to develop creativity skills is to identify them and talk about them. And that may be the single biggest stepping stone to developing creativity in our learners and in ourselves, is being able to say, do you know what, I know where that is, I know what that looks like, and I know I'm not doing it, or I know I am doing it, and I know I could do that more in that context. So the phrase we end up using is we want to be, everybody to be more creative, more often, in more contexts. And that really just about sums it up. There's an interesting quote on the screen just now that kind of flags up, that sums a lot of that thinking up. So that's where we're at the minute in terms of how do you develop creativity skills, and it really is about giving people the opportunity to use their creativity skills rather than blocking those moments.
Mm-hmm. And the next few slides are about a current priority in education, which is about equity and closing the attainment gap. And some really interesting research carried out by a partner organisation of ours. I think it was in Romania with travelling children. And what this research was showing was that, to sum it up very quickly, essentially children engage better with learning when it is about something they're interested in. And it showed how for children who are maybe engaged in their learning already and had some aspirations to sort of perhaps go on to further education, they understood that sometimes you have to apply yourself and learn things that actually you're not that interested in. But for those children who were maybe from more deprived backgrounds, they just didn't see the point in applying themselves to stuff that wasn't really of interest. And so our conclusion from that is, why don't we make efforts to make sure that we engage all learners in learning through contexts that they're interested in and that are relevant to them. So the next slide is part of our attainment infographic, which just highlights that point in a visual. And the next slide, which is also part of that same infographic, talks about what learning that is creative actually looks like. And we hope that through sharing this information, we're helping everybody to think more about, okay, how can we make sure we are engaging all learners and making sure that their learning is deep, engaging, relevant. It hooks them in, basically.
Yeah. I think one of the big key messages that's come out of all this work is that creative learning was often seen as the fun stuff that would, try and engage learners that were not committing to the education process. And what we actually do need to be saying is that it's not easy learning. It's actually harder, more challenging learning than it often can be. If we go back to the pyramid, the hierarchy of higher order thinking skills, creativity is at the top, and you have to be able to do all the ones. You have to be doing all the other skills beneath it in order to be engaged in creative learning. So it's actually the most challenging learning environment and process that there is. And my question to a lot of educators is, how far up that pyramid are you actually taking the learners? Are they stopping at evaluating? Are they stopping at learning facts, or are they actually taking it to the top of the pyramid and using their creativity skills? That's kind of the main things that we wanted to share. There's a few slides I'm just going to rattle through now, which were here just to explain how you can apply creativity skills and all that understanding to our planning and our thinking and creative change. And it basically focused on, so these slides are there for later if you want to look at them, on the idea that the world is changing faster than ever before, which therefore is going to require creative thinking. But equally, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We are still facing and tackling the same issues that we've faced for the last 100 years: equity, attainment, employability, engaging parents, embedding new technologies. And again, those things that don't go away, that don't change, they require creative thinking as well, because the traditional thinking isn't getting us anywhere with them. So to make the argument about how creativity skills relate to the future, spaceports coming, driverless cars, economies changing, and new technologies, we also have a thing called the Transforming Learning approach on the National Improvement Hub, which is a great set of tools that allow you to look at what you want to change and to think creatively around it. And one of the documents that's really, really well used in it is this one. It's called the Scoping and Scanning Process. There's a PDF of it available online in there, and it just gives you those great questions to work through and make sure you're not missing anything, and think creatively about your problem or your task or your project. We're also going to be bringing online in the next wee while, to complement the Creativity Toy Box films, is going to be the Creativity Toolbox films, which are, if you've got a problem or an issue, how do you think it through creatively? So there's going to be a whole range of tools available on that, and there's a great slide there with 4 of them up there, which we've used with at an inspection level when we looked at how are we going to change the inspection processes across Scotland. There's also a lot we've learned from the Creative Learning Award, and again, colleges can apply for this. We're just going through the scoring process for that at the minute, but next year we'd like to see some more colleges applying, and we've learned a huge amount from that. And there's a Louise slide there that explains some of the challenges that schools have gone through in order to come up with a creative response. And that's really interesting. And there's also a creative change pilot project that we ran, where we basically, and this happened in colleges as well, where we matched a problem that was a sticky problem, it wasn't going away, to a creative catalyst who could have been a software engineer or anybody with a creative mind, and how they came in and challenged the thinking in that environment. So that's of interest as well. We have what we call the Creativity Graphic Equalizer, which again is going to be is available on the Improvement Hub, and you can use that to self-evaluate how creative your environment is, your teaching practices, and ask the learners to do the same for you. That's been really well picked up as well, and that's available. And are we going to give them the creative challenge now?
Yeah, why not?
We're going to take questions now, but you could also, if you don't have any questions, think about the creativity skills in your own context with the 3 prompts that are up there. And so use that in the chat box as well to kind of ask questions or feedback, and have a little think about how what we've shared with you applies to your own context.